Hi, and
Mm.
welcome to the Improvisors podcast. I'm Kevin James, and this is my co-host, Neil Thomas.
Thank you, Kevin. Here on the Improvisers podcast, we talk with performers about their histories, their practices, their conceptualizations around their practices, and their aspirations. Who are we in conversation with today, Kevin?
Today, Neil, we've got the wonderful opportunity to chat with JANICE Florence. Janice spoke about her role as an advocate for disabled performance, spoke about disability, creativity, and expression, and also spoke about the history of State of Flux and Weave Movement Theatre in Melbourne.
She reminisces about California in the 80s and talks about contact improvisation and the edict, curiosity, not ambition.
Mm.
And finally, it's revealed the significance for Janice of the colour purple. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Janice Florence as much as we did.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Let's go.
One, good morning, Janice Florence, and welcome to the Improvisers podcast. We've been looking forward to this, and we're thrilled. We're thrilled to be in conversation with you today.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe,
To talk about improv.
yeah, maybe we can start, if you don't mind, at having a go describing how you started with performance.
Well, I started at a very early age because we used to go, I went to what was the Maydown School of Dance in Russell Street in Melbourne from the age of about 4. And I have got old photos and memories of being in a concert at Collingwood Town Hall as a duck, a monkey, um, someone in a romper suit playing with a ball, and a couple of other things with sort of old timey music. And I was just talking to a friend about it the other day, actually, and remembering one of the songs. And so that was my first experience of performance. There was a bit of a performing thing in the family. My mother liked to sing and play the ukulele and the piano, and my grandfather was quite a good singer, apparently, and my grandmother was a piano teacher. So there was a bit of a performance thing, especially around music in the family. Yeah, and so then I went to the Borovansky Ballet School from the age of about 7 to 11. And actually, I recently, in a Weave show, did a solo about this, a kind of reminiscence of the ballet school, which became the Australian Ballet. And there was Russian migrants who came here before the Second World War and got stuck here. Um, and yeah, and then I'm very tall. I'm nearly 6 foot, so I felt very out of place eventually when I reached puberty in the ballet school, with all the little sylph-like people sort of floating around me. And a bit later, I went to various classes when I was at Melbourne University in contemporary dance and classes around with famous people like Margaret Lassica. And then I in those classes, strangely enough, there was one that used to be in the city, where I bumped into for the first time Andrew Morrish, who's famous in the improvisation world. And then I did the graduate diploma of movement and dance, which was initially at the Institute of Early Childhood Development in Melbourne, and then became part of Melbourne University. And a lot of people who we all know have gone through that course. So that really introduced me to improvisation. There were a lot of Laban ideas from Rudolf Laban, and the Hanny Exener, who ran that course at that stage, had studied with Laban in Vienna. And also we started being introduced. Oh, there was sort of a dance anthropology part of it where we did some African dancing, and we were introduced to Skinner releasing at that stage in that course through people who were interested in it, and who had been and worked with Joan Skinner in Seattle. like Nancy Lang and Linda Leo. And so that's when I first really had my introduction to improvisation and various ways of approaching it. And I remember they took a video of us at the beginning of the course and then showed it to us at the end of the course. And I noticed that I was sort of basically trying to do ballet at the beginning because that was all I really knew, and contemporary dance a bit. And by the end that had totally changed. Yeah, so that was a real eye-opener. And I was also in that course introduced to the work of Anna Halprin. And just a few years after that, I went to California to do a course with Anna Halprin. And that was in that course, we did a lot of different approaches to improvisation. And also we drew a lot in that course. So Anna tended to work through parts of the body and in movement. And we drew, we just free drew after sessions. And we were working up to doing a life-size self-portrait of ourselves. And so in the end, we did a life-size self-portrait and performed to it. And then, being intrigued by everything that was on offer in San Francisco, I came home and went back again fairly rapidly and stayed there for 9 months doing classes with Ruth Sapora and Terry Sengraf, who did a thing called, what was it called? Anyway, it was sort of trapeze dancing. And Lyndon Nichols in Melbourne also was doing that. And so when I came back, I continued with classes with Lyndon. And by then, Lyndon and Al Wonder were living in a studio in Fitzroy where you could go to classes. And so, and then I went through a thing of performing with Al. And then I had found out about American by then, and then I had my accident where I became paraplegic, which was actually connected with dance because I got to like hanging upside down on these low trapezes that were a part of trapeze dance. It wasn't a high-flying circus trapeze, but low trapeze, which was sort of an adjunct to dance. And I moved into a house where there was a bar in the backyard, and I used to hang on it. And one day I slipped off it and landed on my lower back and broke my back. So that's how that happened. And so then I started being interested in what was happening. And then, yeah, anyway, that's a big story. But I started being interested in what was happening in dance, especially in the USA with disability in dance. And there were quite a few people doing a form of contact improvisation. And so some of them came out here and I did classes. And then I somehow met up with Martin Hughes, and I already knew Wendy Smith from Al's classes. And so then I was invited to sort of try a little trio thing with them. And also Llewellyn Wishart was involved in the initial stages. And yeah, it went from there, and then Flux developed and other people came in, Jacob and David. And Flux went on for 10 years from there, teaching and performing. And because contact improvisation hadn't been big on performance, we were interested in seeing how it could develop as a performance form, and that was part of our research.
Janice, it'd be great if you could just maybe talk a little bit further about State of Flux, because I think the way you've introduced it then, and I think it was so significant historically, both with the opportunity for you to perform with disability as well as performing contact improvisation, and for 10 years. So tell us a bit more about the explorations and what you found and what you discovered over that time, and how that might have led towards weave movement theatre, if there's an entwinement there.
Hmm. Well, that was a great delight to me because having dancing with other people, sharing weight, etc., allowed me to have a lot of dimensions to my movement that I probably couldn't achieve by myself at that stage as a wheelchair user. And especially, I guess, the then young guys, Jacob and David, were very daring and risk taking, and so that they took risks with me, and that was quite enjoyable for me because you tend to get stereotyped as a disabled person, and people expect you not to take risks and to stay within a fairly limited range of movement. And so them sort of dunking me off the chair and picking me up again and dragging me around the floor, I guess was a bit of shock value for the audience and also a bit of an education. So I enjoyed that. And I just enjoyed having that freedom. And so, yeah, we developed and we worked with, at one stage we brought Nancy Stark-Smith to Australia, who had been one of the initiators of contact improvisation in New York. I guess it's been going for about 50 years now, contact improvisation, all over the world. And it tends to be in the form of jams where people get together and see what happens with the principles of contact. And one of the principles is curiosity, not ambition. I think it's kind of hard to keep that principle because you do sometimes get a bit ambitious to do the flashy things. But it's a good principle for me. It was a good principle for me because I could discover what I could and couldn't do and what I liked doing and didn't like doing. And then there's the principles of weight and sort of a circular rolling principle. And apparently, in the early days, Aikido was an influence. And so already with Anna Halperin, we had an improvisation teacher who came from an Aikido background. So there was a bit of continuity there. And then we did a lot of teaching as well, and contact became a bigger thing. And we started the Jam, which is actually still continuing to this day at Dance House in Carlton. So that's been a huge journey and a big thing in Melbourne in improvisation. That's people have become, really involved in it and have continued it on. And so State of Flux, so we worked with Nancy Stark-Smith and that time was for us for 3 weeks to develop performance with her there. And we performed in Sydney and Melbourne after that at the VCA and in the performance space in Sydney. And so we went on and we finished up in 2007 after 10 years. Yeah, and I guess then I was invited to, and Martin and I were invited to run a series of workshops by Arts Access Victoria for a mixture of disabled and non-disabled dancers. And that's where that was the origins of Weave. And we did start with some sort of adapted contact ideas. And they were open and, the ideas are open and flexible enough to adapt them. You can't go into the flashy over your shoulder things, but there was an interesting development in the ways that we found to use the principles with people with various different types of disability.
I can't help but be first of all in awe of your story, but also like really moved and shocked by the idea of a person who started dancing from the age of 4 and it's been her all thing and really dedicated to it to have such an accident, and to keep going after that in the field of dance. A little bit earlier before the interview about improvisation helping you to deal with that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, unpack that a bit.
Well, I think initially I was in a bit of a state of denial after the accident. You know, it was which was probably healthy for me in a way, because it enabled me to just keep going, thinking, oh, yes, I can still do this. And then also, when I was going through rehab, one of the student physios was studying Feldenkrais. And so I was able to get involved in that. And that involves imagining doing some movements as well as actually doing some movements. And so I think that helped me keep in contact with my whole body and imagine my whole body moving. And I kept on with that for a few years after my rehab. But also, I think having done improvisation, I could play around and imagine what I could do. And also, I was lucky enough to have Al Wonder take me, as soon as I got out of rehab, really back into his classes. And also, Nancy Lang was then teaching Skinner releasing, and I had been going to her classes, and I went straight back into them as well. So there was a degree of acceptance. I think, I don't know, people might have found it a bit daunting at first, but there was a degree of acceptance of me, and the fact that I could go back to what I had been doing helped me the acceptance of it helped me to stay there and to have time to explore what I could do. And Skinner releasing is a lot to do with having images in your mind, and then they're mainly sort of images from nature, but there are some physical exercises as well. And being able to, and other kinds of images, play with, because, you know, as far as Skinner releasing is concerned, you can just lie around on a mattress and do nothing, or you can take it into movement and you can just work with the images, and you can take it into whatever movement you want to do that is provoked by the state that you've got into through these images. And so having that enabled me to just play around with what I could do. And I think, I don't know if it was the denial and the ability to go back into it, but I still could get the joy of dancing from what I could do then. And then doing contact put a lot more momentum into that and more dimensions. So I think having ways of approaching improvisation and ways of, having the power to work with what I had enabled me to keep going and to enjoy it. I mean, it wasn't always totally easy, because of course you're grieving what you couldn't do anymore sometimes, but and also some people are a bit put off by it if you're in a class with them. They don't quite know how to handle it, how they should be. People have a lot of ideas about, I should behave this way and that way with a disabled person. And so I came up against that a bit. But there was enough there that I could keep going and I could enjoy it. And then being with State of Flux was, wonderful, because they went on for 10 years and I was able to perform and have also the ingenuity of everyone in that group contributing to what I could do. Because Wendy being very interested in body work, Martin and Jacob and David being really interested in my widget, my wheelchair, which they could also do things with. and different things from what they normally did.
I'm imagining, Janice, when you mentioned before about curiosity, not ambition, I'm imagining in some ways both were relevant to finding your way as well. The curiosity of what could be and the ambition to keep you striving, I suppose, towards possibilities. And somehow that dance between the two, I guess, was integral to you finding and continuing to find your way.
Yes,
I'm wondering,
yeah.
I'm wondering, with Weave Movement Theatre, of which you're artistic director,
Mm.
can you say more about what you and all of those involved in Weave have achieved over time and what you're continuing to sort of aspire to?
Mm.
And is there a way of linking um, State of Flux and things that you learned there, of course, into what Weave became? Was there a direct link, or was it just you carrying forward the many things that you had accrued and finding ways to bring them to life and fruition in a company?
Mm. Yeah, definitely contact has played a part, and there is still a sense of how physical contact can work in the company. We have often worked with disabled and non-disabled dancers, so the contact element has also come in there. And all of the other, yeah, bringing, and also the sense of ensemble, I think, that we had in State of Flux has been very important. And people often comment on the shared movement language that we have and a sense of a strong ensemble interacting on stage. So, and people always commented in State of Flux that we had a good spatial sense. And I think that's come through to Weave as well, often in most cases. Also, though, we've branched out and worked with a lot of artists in Weave as directors and teachers as a collaboration. And so we've also gained a lot from them. There's some contemporary dancers who do devising as part of their practice. We've worked with Yumi Mamari, who's a well-known Buto, Japanese Australian Buto artist. And in our most recent show, which was every person had a solo and everyone chose their own director, I worked with Michelle Heaven, who's a contemporary, dancer performer who devises a lot of her own independent work, well known in the contemporary dance world. So yeah, we've had input from a lot of people, and I guess we've come to a point where we devise work from improvisation and then sort of have a set performance, but within that, there's always a degree of improvisation. And I think that's a fairly common practice in contemporary dance now. Just trying to think of who else we might have worked. There's a lot of people. We've worked with Born in a Taxi a few times, and we've had David Wells and Andrew Morrish come in our early stages to work with us. So kept that sort of wing of improvisation, which came out of Al's studio, I guess, and also out of the people involved in, say, Born in a Taxi, who worked with John Bolton. We've also done a bit of Buffon, which was fun because it's a bit edgy around disability, because you was meant to wear lumps and bumps in your body and look like strange, marginalised outcasts. So there was a bit of identity and also a bit of sort of teetering on the edge there. Yeah, so a lot of influences have come in and we've made use of them over the years.
Wow, thanks. I'm wondering if you could have a go at describing how you see yourself now, and you see yourself in the work as well, like the current work and where the work might be headed.
Yes, well, in the last 2 years, we've been fortunate enough to have 2-year project funding from Creative Victoria. So that gave us leeway to try out some things. And we worked a bit with sensory theatre, which is trying to work with all the senses within performance, bringing in, you know, senses of smell and taste as well, and as well as vision and hearing, which is the main senses usually involved. And touch, touch, which is sort of has been a long ongoing theme through contact improvisation. So yeah, and then that piece was called A Sense of Place. So it was kind of nominally around your sense of connection to place, and that meant something different to everybody. So everyone could pursue their own theme really with that. And then we came this year into doing solos, and everyone made their own choice of director. So that was really interesting in the way that they were led by those directors in various different ways. That gave them a chance to initiate their own work, everyone in the company, 6 people at the moment. I mean, we have had different numbers in the company over the years, and people have gone on to do lots of other things, gone overseas. Lisa Proud, who was with us, is now in Berlin and quite successfully working with companies in Berlin. And Caroline Bowditch, who was with us at the beginning, went to England for 15 years and was quite successful there in creating work. So and where we go from here, we have got a project at the moment with a young dancer called Rebecca Jensen, and she's working quite a bit with digital, so filming during the performance, and we're working with a sound artist on that as well. So we're going in that direction for the moment. We sort of started working with Rebecca because Arts House, this is meant to be happening this year at Arts House, and they've given us support in doing developments with Rebecca. And they wanted us to work with someone new who might take us in a different direction in order to put us on. And so that's been really interesting. And Rebecca's a very open person who takes from us, gives us ideas, and then takes from what we come up with, you know, which is the devising process. And so that's exciting for me. I find working with her challenging, and her great choreographic and devising skills are stimulating for me, and the rest of the company, because she's such an open person, are working really well with her too. Look, and I can't, you know, I'm getting older and I can't take the physical risks that I used to take. But, you know, every new phase brings something new. In my solo, I use my electric wheelchair, which also rises up. So Michelle was very keen to use that, and my story was really about my childhood engagement with the arts and with a voiceover from me. And so she devised this amazing costume that was like tucked into my skirt down the front at one stage. And it was a huge piece of fabric that then spread out through the whole space. And I had this big headdress on that was reminiscent. It was sort of like petals of me being a flower as a child in a piece that I briefly mentioned. So anyway, that just filled up the whole space. And then I sort of rose up in the wheelchair to a height. And so every phase has and every device has a new thing you can do with it, I guess. And so this year we will continue with that project, and we'll also have a few workshops to sort of experiment a bit with other forms and other teachers.
Janice, you've been so significant in what you've done in Melbourne over time. You've received many accolades around what you've done. And we want to just further confirm this morning how significant it has been and is being, and obviously will continue to be. Does move?
Oh, well, Oh, look, I also should mention BMC, which I've been doing online a bit because I enjoy it and it gives you the liberty to not care what anyone thinks of what you're doing, which is a nice thing to be able to throw in when you've got a performance focus mainly.
Janice, does Weave have any direct affiliations with other companies overseas? Are there exchanges you have, exchanges of ideas or personnel, or is that, or are you living and continue to explore more in a sort of a curious isolation?
Well, we have had, yeah, look, I've had connection with overseas through some time I spent with Can Do Co in England and also with teachers in America. I've been back to Skinner releasing a few times for summer schools and did an online summer school during the lockdowns with Joan Skinner's sort of descendants. And yeah, we've sort of had a residency with another company in England quite a while ago. So I do take notice of what they're doing now. I think, look, here we get into the whinging artist thing. Um, we don't have huge resources, and mainly I'm working by myself. From time to time, we get some funding, which means I can have someone working with me, but it's very hard to reach out and do extra things apart from the core work of the company when you don't have more staff around to do those things. So, reaching out, doing an exchange would be marvelous, but especially the last 2 years have been really busy just fulfilling the projects we needed to do for that funding. And yeah, unfortunately, we haven't had a chance to do that. And the dream is of getting organisational funding, but it is very difficult and very competitive. So we mainly function on project funding.
I was wondering if you could reflect upon, it's a little bit outside the topic of performing, I suppose, but it strikes me that there's elements of advocacy and working with minorities and diversity.
Yes, well, that's definitely, yeah.
Talk a little bit about that. Be great.
Yes, that's definitely been part of my motivation, I guess, from the beginning to the ambition part. It was to sort of a rebellious and side of me, and I've always been, since, to university, is probably an advocate for human rights of various different kinds and involved in those causes. To prove that it can be done and it can be done well. And it's interesting and entertaining theatre. And some people, actually one person who's a long-time theatre practitioner said to us after our solo show that it was the most interesting experimental work that she'd seen for a while in Melbourne. So, yeah, there's that element of diversity, and we have a right to do this too, and we can do it well, and, open up your eyes to what's possible and steer away from your stereotypes. There's, yeah, definitely that element in it. And I also work at Arts Access Victoria, have been for the last 10 years or so, as an advocate, going out into the arts industry and training on awareness, and also advising on various forms of access for deaf, blind access, physical access, neurodivergent access. And so that has been a big element in my life. Yeah.
Janice, I'd like to circle back a little bit to improvisation, which I guess is the focus of the podcast series. And I hear you speak about improvisation being integral to processes within Weave, processes of creating performance, processes to do with gathering material that might be fashioned further intentionally towards performance. I'm wondering what you would say now about improvisation for yourself for the company, just to further our reflection around, because it also feels a little bit like your life has needed to be improvised in many ways over time. You've needed to find your way from places that were very surprising, and I guess that involves both strategic thinking, but also thinking on the go in order to find your way and find possibilities, which I think is the heart of improvising in life. I'd love to hear you speak a little bit more about
Yes,
it for you.
definitely. Yes, you've really picked up on something there because so one disabled advocate said that having a disability is an ingenious way of life because even though things have improved, society doesn't always cater to you. In fact, quite often doesn't cater. And you have to find ways of overcoming those barriers. And I also think that being body aware has helped me to make the most of the function that I have from various different physical practices that I've done. Has helped me know how I can use my body in the best way to get the best out of it. Although, I probably gave it a rough time sometimes in contact improvisation, and also, as you use parts of your body that aren't used normally in that way, you have to be careful. But I think it helps me to continue to be able to use my body to have all that improvisation, body awareness, ways of coming up with alternative solutions to things. And also, like, the principle with improvising within the company to devise work is around exploring and discovering what people might find for themselves, what individual performers might find for themselves with whatever their range of thinking or movement or whatever is, either way, their approach in their mind and their body. So there's sort of a bit of a democratic principle in that, I guess. But I also have probably become a bit more, I can't think of the right word, sort of particular about what we present in the end as an end product, as a performance. So although, it all comes from improvisation and there's always some improvisation involved, the look of it, I guess, in the end has become more important to me than, say, if you're just in an improvisation session. But then, you have to be careful not to become too fixed with that, because a lot of the freshness can come from the improvisation part of it.
Yeah, the weaving of the two together,
Yeah.
process and product, I suppose.
And the weaving of different kinds of people. We've got in the company at the moment people with physical and intellectual conditions, neurodivergent. So yeah, weaving of all those things together is interesting and a challenge, but it's really interesting at the same time. And I've learned huge amounts because just because I had a physical disability doesn't mean that I knew everything about every other disability.
I feel pretty full with everything. I'm not sure I have another question. The only big question I have is a very minor question, and I was just thinking about your costume today and the matching of the glasses with the top, and thinking about the colour. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the colour purple.
Oh, well, it's got a long history to it. When I was at university, I became friendly with a recent English migrant in my English literature lectures who wore a big purple cloak to lectures, and I was captivated by that. And later on, I moved into a house with her, and everything was purple. She had a proper Renaissance dress made in purple velvet, and so I guess I absorbed the purple influence, and I think the colour suits me, and it's been with me ever since. Because she had a lot of other influences on me as well. She was also tall, and so I had, from my family, received a lot of ribbing about being tall, and also, the exclusion from ballet and all that sort of thing that I felt. And that's my recent solo was a bit about that. And one of my lines in the solo was, I was on a quest for a place where giants could dance. And so that's the rising up of the chair. But um, she had a big influence on me in that way, and that she would always say, oh, I remember one time we were walking through the city, and she said, we're striding through the city like twin colossi. So she sort of had a sense of humor about it, but also always building it up rather than being shamed or feeling out of place. So yeah, the color purple was all a part of that whole history, and I've kept it.
Oh, what a beautiful story. What a beautiful story, Janice.
Janice, can I just ask just one passing question? Because I was just pondering, in earlier times with practices that privileged embodiment, and I'm thinking about both contact improvisation and the many other practices that you've spoken about today, and practices that we've been involved in over time, I guess, as improvisers and performers. But many of those early practices sort of privilege the body, and often, the body as a place of knowing, and the body as a place of living and being in the world. And I guess you and your company and others have had to find, and all of us had to find ways of privileging the bodies that we have, as we age as well, or as our bodies are formed or shaped by circumstance, happenstance, accident, etc. I'd love to know a little bit more about anything you might further comment about sort of privileging the body we have and accessing and using that. I find myself talking about a body, but using our embodied being as an ongoing resource.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's difficult because we're so conditioned in this society. I don't know if it's got worse or it was always that way. Um, about having a certain type of body, and certain types of body are best, and I certainly received that during my growing up. Um, so it is difficult to come to that, to come to acceptance. Um, and I guess for me, I probably still don't totally accept myself. I think I've got better with it. Um, is I think for me, and I observe in people in leave that it helps people to come to terms, and also just to enjoy. You can do this in your way, and you can enjoy it, and you can make something of it, and sort of fulfill artistic ambitions with it. An urge to the people who have joined Weave do have artistic ambitions and artistic talents, and they want to fulfill them. And I think through the creating of the art, you can rise above maybe doubts about your body. While, of course, you wish from time to time that you could do more things, or other things, but somehow the enjoyment of it, maybe the ambition of it, the curiosity of it, overcomes that for me, and I've noticed for other people.
Great. Well, we've run out of time, Janice. It's been a wonderful chat, and in some ways a deep examination, but also it feels like we could go on forever, chapters and chapters of things to dig into. Thank you so much this morning for your time and your willingness to share your story.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. It's great to delve back into all those things again and just think about things that you've done and might continue to do, and just reminisce a bit as well, I suppose.
Yeah. Thank you, Janice. So thank you again so much for the opportunity to chat this morning. It's been really rich, and thank you for your openness and availability around talking about things of importance. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great. Thanks for your questions. Been really enjoyable.